Good evening, everyone. I'm Susie Loftman. I am a state senator, and I'm also proud to say I serve as a co-chair of the Reading Consortium for Educational Equity. We are here hosting our third community town hall, or Strong Schools Town Halls, what we've been calling them, on behalf of the Reading Consortium. And we are being hosted in the library at PS DuPont Middle School. So thanks to the Brandywine team for allowing us to use this space to reach folks. And so just very thankful to all of you who are making some time this evening to join us. We would like this to be the community conversation we believe it can be. And a few reminders, just housekeeping stuff, just want to make sure folks who are online do try to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. There is an option for bilingual translated captions under the More Options tab on Zoom. So if that's something that you need, or if you know someone who would tune in with that option, please let them know to get online. They can utilize that option. We are also asking you to please share your input in the chat as we go along. Feel free to do that. Also, we ask you to use the raised hand function on Zoom when we get to the community conversation portion of the evening. This meeting is being recorded and it is going to be posted for public viewing. I'm going to take a moment to introduce some of the Reading Consortium leadership team, who I believe all are in one way or another online with us. Some of them might be in transit through tonight's beautiful weather to join us virtually or in person. Matt Den, who is my Reading Consortium co-chair, I believe is online. Representative Namdi Chukwocha, who is a co-founder of the Reading Consortium and a leader of our redistricting project, is on his way up from Dover. And I believe will be joining us in person. Elena, is that right?
Yes.
And then Councilwoman Maria Cabrera will be joining us from her city council meeting shortly into the meeting. And Taylor Hawk, who is the Director of Legislative and Political Strategy at DSEA, is representing that organization on behalf of Stephanie Ingram. Stephanie Ingram and Councilwoman Cabrera are co-chairs of one of the subcommittees of the redistricting project that Reading Consortium is leading, and they lead the community engagement subcommittee. So just the agenda for this evening, what we would like to achieve. We'd like to share our vision for Strong Schools and a brief history of the history of redistricting in Wilmington. That's something Representative Chukwocha does very well, so I hope he'll be here in time to help us do that. And then we're going to go over the process that we have been pursuing thus far for the redistricting project. So it's going to be very process oriented and very vision oriented. And our main focus of doing these, the main goal is really about engaging community and understanding what we have been up to, hearing from folks about values and priorities for great public schools in Wilmington and greater Wilmington, northern Newcastle County, so that as we continue on this path and process, that can inform the work of all the members of our subcommittees and the consortium at large. We will share a small recap of next steps, and there will be an opportunity for public comment at the end as well. So while there's going to be like an open communication period where we're going to pose some specific questions, you know, we're hoping to be able to kind of segment responses to those questions versus maybe more process-oriented questions in the public comment period. I also want to, of course, acknowledge that we have educational leaders from UD's Institute for Public Administration and DSU who are always with us as staff members, without whom, as those of you who were in the room before I got here with Elena Robinson know that Reading Consortium could do nothing without those team members. So thank you to all of them. So I'll just kind of go on a little bit of a tangent here for a little bit to lay the foundation of our purpose as on behalf of the consortium, but I'll just start with on behalf of myself. To speak for myself, I'm a very proud product and just citizen of the city of Wilmington. I think this is a wonderful city. I think we have so much going for us, creativity, wonderful people, hard workers. We are the heart of Delaware, in my opinion. And I'm also a very proud product of Delaware Public Schools. And these public schools made me who I am. I'm a product of educators who poured into me, who showed their love for not just myself, but all of the young people and members of our community and all that they gave to our kids. And I know that's not a foreign concept probably to anyone who took the time to log on tonight. I'm here also proudly as the parent of one child who went all the way through our Delaware Public School system at this point, graduated from Delaware Public Schools and is now, oh my gosh, I guess a rising senior in college. And then I have another little guy who just turned 3 and will be entering them in a few short years. So I am all kinds of invested in the strength of our schools. And I think that is probably undeniably true of everyone in this room and everyone in the Zoom room. And I hope that we can also all agree that we have an incredible opportunity to keep forging a brighter future for our kids. Both those from the city of Wilmington, where we often focus our conversation about challenge, but I think also greater Wilmington, and have this serve as a model for Delaware as a whole. You all know that strong schools are the foundation of a strong community, and that every family and every community and every child needs and deserves that foundation in order to strive to thrive for themselves and in order for our state to thrive. But we also know that the story of Wilmington schools that brings us here doesn't just start today. We know that there is a lot of past. We know a lot about what we find challenging in the present. And there's a future where we're going to be working through a lot of things. And that past story, some of the current story is painful at times, and there are mistakes that have been made over that time. But what we'd like to challenge every one of us to do today is to do what we tell our kids. Let's try to learn from the things that we've done in past decades, even in more recent years, and try to just keep our eyes on the prize, that there is always more and better that we can do for each individual student, for every school, for this great city, and for Delaware. And I personally believe that that is very achievable, despite the fact that, you know, I think I'm coming up on a decade of being part of groups that are doing this work. And I bet if we added all of our years together of striving for that in the room, we'd probably come with a much, much, much bigger number. But this Reading Consortium initiative, I think, is just one really promising part of building that brighter future. But I think we are positioned to take a really big step, and I'm very, very proud of that. You know, it goes all the way back though to my conversations and days when I was a PTA leader, when my college-age daughter was in elementary school. I've heard since then a real appetite for change in all kinds of different ways. An increasing number of families, and we're not just talking about those who are most challenged, who I think often we center in conversations of thought leaders around education, but families of all incomes, neighborhoods, backgrounds, really increasingly struggle to navigate our local school system as it's currently configured. And while that is, you know, a problem that we all talk about at sporting events and arts events and things like that, I think it's also, I like to see it as more of an opportunity, and hope that that's something that we can dig into tonight. So thank you everyone in this room for caring enough about our schools and our public schools, and everyone involved in them and engaging them to be here now. The commitment I will make is that I'm going to keep my eye on the prize as well, not just for my own kids or just Wilmington kids, but for all of the kids that are served by, you know, all of the schools that we care about in Wilmington, Northern Newcastle County. So with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the collective vision that the Reading Consortium has put together. Yes, there it is. So, you know, I think we believe in some really basic stuff that every child deserves access to a great school, a high quality education, no matter where they're coming from. We also agree as a collective that changing school district boundaries is not some silver bullet and solution to everything, but we do believe that it is a very important first step to bringing school communities together and addressing some of the barriers and challenges that have impacted students in recent times. You know, this is really part of a larger and bigger planning process to improve schools and support stronger and more connected communities. We want students to be able to excel in school by expanding access to the academic resources and supports that can better meet their needs. And the focus of our efforts is not just about cutting the pie in a new way, but we hope ultimately it's more about growing a pie. That this is not that there is a finite amount of excellence to be had, that everyone needs to fight each other for, but that we can actually make sure that there is enough for everyone to reach into and share. You know, so our vision fundamentally is just how do we help the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County meet across its landscape the Reading Consortium's definition of educational equity. So for anyone who's online who's not familiar with the Reading Consortium so far, we were formed in 2019. Representative Chikwocha and I ran some legislation to reauthorize what had previously been the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission. And we sort of revised the name of it. We revised some of the different components and membership and things like that, just a little bit, little tweaks. But so we sort of refreshed it and restarted it in 2019. And the role of this body, this legislatively established body, is to recommend policies and practices to the Governor and General Assembly of Delaware in order to improve educational equity for all students. So I'll probably, this will sound a little redundant from some of the bullets I already heard, but I think these are things we can't say too much. In our very first meeting in the fall of 2019, we sort of crowdsourced. I think we had our 25, 30 members of the Reading Consortium who met on that first day. And we spent a lot of time just like crowd creating the definition of educational equity. So it is a lot of words, but I'm going to read what our definition is. You can also find this on our website, solutionsfordelawareschools.com. So our collaborative definition for educational equity is as follows. Educational equity requires safe, secure, and student-focused learning environments where every student is intentionally provided access to the support, resources, and opportunities they need to reach their full academic and social potential in and out of the classroom. So a little bit of a wonky definition, and one of the things that we want to do these gatherings for is to kind of get a little bit more of perspective of our communities as to what that means for them. You know, for us, of course, it means we want to see improved academic outcomes for students in pre-K and the 12th grade, through the 12th grade rather, in the city in northern Newcastle County. But we know there's other metrics and measures and ways people want to talk about what great outcomes could be. And we work to achieve these goals already by submitting policy recommendations to the General Assembly and the Governor. In 2020, we had been really pushing to advance, you know, the redistricting work that had been done by WEIC around that time. And of course, we all know that 2020 was the pandemic. So we kind of rocked back on our heels and thought, what can we do that can really move the needle in the short term? So we have a number of recommendations that have already been put in place, funded and implemented by the state. And we continue to work with state agencies and community partners to be able to observe and gather more data on how these efforts improve educational equity. So some examples of the things that we have done to help expand access to excellence. We have supported a growth in the number of full-day pre-K seats. So making sure our youngest learners have access to excellent opportunities. And it's actually a model that involves some particular stipulations around like compensation for the teachers and things like that, that has now been adopted wide for as an ECAP model. So that's one accomplishment we have under our belt. We have supported the expansion of in-school health centers and of school-time services for students. And we developed a program, a scholarship program for eligible City of Wilmington educators and staff. There are particular schools that we have designated as Reading schools. That we are using as a means to meaningfully address teacher recruitment and retention. And of course, as I've mentioned numerous times now, another really key part of our charge is working on redistricting in the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County. We are mandated by the legislation that established us that we reestablished, carrying over to the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission to pursue the exploration of a redistricting proposal. This is outlined in legislation listed here, Senate Bill 148 and House Bills 222 and 229. So we will continue to work to expand opportunities so that every student has the opportunity to access all kinds of aspects of a world-class education in great schools that we can recommend to the state and have supported that way. I don't know if Representative Chikwocha is available on the line, but if he is not, you all are gonna have to listen to me for several more slides. I apologize.
Yeah, he's still en route.
He's still en route.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad out there. All right, so I'm gonna talk through these and then I will hand it over back to myself. Okay, so this won't be as artful as having a poet laureate talk to you about this, but I'll do my best. So a brief, very brief history of what redistricting in the city of Wilmington is, and just the context that we're facing. So we have 18 public schools located physically in the city of Wilmington, serving about 11,000 students. These are over the years. You know, school leaders, community members have worked together to try to improve some of the gaps that have emerged when it comes to both inputs and outputs for students in those schools. We believe that that system is still more complex than it needs to be, and that some of these obstacles to effective delivery of education, particularly for these students who are currently being served in a very fractured way, would be to find a more unified way to support all students in schools. You know, the anecdotes we often hear in the city of Wilmington is talking about, you know, a family can be on one side of the street and attend a school in one school district. And then, as we know, we have a lot of very highly mobile families and students move a block or two away and be in a brand new school district and have to learn a whole sort of set of policies and ways of being and functioning in school all over again, and how disruptive that can be. And so to us, what that tells us is that while not everything, governance and being able to have some consistency around governance as it pertains to families who are often highly mobile as it is in the city of Wilmington could be really advantageous. We are not just pulling this out of the air. The work that the Reading Consortium is basing a lot of our assertions and our planning on goes back decades of community input and reporting to guide this. So really, I guess kicking off in 2001 with the Wilmington Neighborhood Schools Committee, which was formed after we passed the Neighborhood Schools Act, which significantly restructured student assignments in kindergarten through fifth grade. We've seen a lot of conversations about the impact that that was going to have and was having over time on students in the city of Wilmington, and the you know, the effect of seeing an increasing heightening of concentration of poverty in our schools in particular, and what that impact had on school climate, school culture, and, you know, just ability to deliver in a way that it would allow the maximum number of students to thrive. So we saw a lot of repeated observations of these challenges and very, very consistent recommendations over these intervals. So you see 2008, there was a Wilmington Education Task Force led by Senator Margaret Rose Henry. Then in 2015, Governor Markell established the Wilmington Education Advisory Committee, which quickly led to a legislative act to form the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission in 2016. It's kind of incredible that that was all a decade ago now. But a lot of you were probably at the table in one form or another back then as well. And what was being recommended at the time was consolidation of districts in the city of Wilmington, and in particular, kind of a repeating drumbeat about the Christina School District and concerns there. So just to kind of illustrate a little bit more of the complexity or the incongruity of what we have today is we have this simple map of the current school district boundaries, the black lines that you see, you can kind of try to look through those because those are actually municipality boundaries. You can see the city of Wilmington around where the word Wilmington is and sort of tangential to that ACL's Mary, you see Newport, so on and so forth. So dark black lines, municipalities. And the color coded areas show us, where our current northern Newcastle County school districts are. Brandywine, Christina, Colonial, and Red Clay. See Brandywine in sort of the upper right corner and Red Clay to the west of it. Colonial coming along the river in yellow on the southern end. And of course, we have Christina, which has remained as one of, I don't know what the number is at this very moment, it is an increasingly small number that we get to cite nationally of discontiguous school districts that exist. So you have the Newark area piece of Christina, and then you have this little footprint hanging out in the city that is greatly set apart from its counterparts, and of course, their students going back and forth over a large gap where other districts reside. So that inconsistency and concerns with what that has led to, obviously, are a big part of why we continue to do this work. So in terms of the planning and process that we've been pursuing, our most notable recent action was a year ago. On May 9th of 2024, we approved as a consortium what we called an interim plan. So it was really a framework to lay the basis for creating an actual proposal that meets the conditions set out for us in legislation of what a redistricting proposal needs to involve. We also were able to affirm this plan with a General Assembly vote on a resolution saying, good work, keep going, basically. And the main tenets of this interim plan outline a call for no more than 2 school districts to serve City of Wilmington students, and a call to remove the footprint of the Christina School District that's currently in the city. So for that to go away, I'll just repeat that. These were the areas of consensus that all of the variety of stakeholders who serve on the consortium were able to agree upon. We had looked at some other proposals that were more specific about how to change lines. We sort of took a step back and said, what can we agree makes the most sense for governance change for the city of Wilmington and Northern Newcastle County? And it was primarily those 2 things. 2 or fewer school districts should govern the city of Wilmington, and the Christina School District, being discontiguous, should no longer serve the city of Wilmington, and that footprint should no longer be a part of that school district. So that's not all that was in there. There were some other major components. One being a very specific timeline to keep things moving. It's always important, and that clock started ticking in May of 2024. So meaning that December of this year is our deadline to deliver a fully developed final redistricting plan. And it also laid out the structure for us to pursue that. So certain subcommittees that we would have to put into place and charge those subcommittees to come up with ways to address what we call the 13 stipulations. So these are specifically in Delaware State Code that passed and created our body that say, like, a redistricting plan has to include these 13 things. You have to be able to speak to these, tell us what the plan is, give us some very, very clear direction. And that's been around since the Wilmington Education and Improvement Commission days. So we really just kind of continued those on. The 3 subcommittees, by the way, that we have are focused, one on operational impacts, one on fiscal impacts, and one on community engagement. So that was really the way those stipulations broke down. Each group kind of has a set of those that they are responsible for figuring out how do we do appropriate stakeholder engagement, information gathering to come up with the right answers. We also sort of pulled together, really kind of live in that meeting last May, a call to conduct what in the long form we call a social drivers of health and education landscape analysis for the city of Wilmington and northern Newcastle County. We ultimately ended up retaining the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, to conduct this study. And it's really not about looking at like analyzing gaps within the school system, which oftentimes what you see with some of these analyses, but it's really looking more about outside of school factors that we feel could be potentially impactful to students' educational outcomes and could also be really informative in designing, you know, moving district lines and being thoughtful about some of the challenges that we've already experienced in things like concentration of poverty and things like that, you know, trying to avoid doubling down or recreating some of those same types of challenges. Another major area of this report on a very, very high level laid out what we call big ideas for policy reform. So again, coming back to this idea that like, sure, you can change lines on a map, you can change signs on a building, but what are you actually changing that's going to be going on inside of those buildings and inside of classrooms that's actually going to make a difference for the experience that students have? You know, and that being obviously the true goal. So we wanted to make sure that we were also making some bigger picture policy reform recommendations related to things that are of course relevant. Things like school funding, which there's a whole other entity working on that, but we were keeping an eye on that, of course. Certain types of investments that the state could potentially make, looking at policies like charter schools and school choice reform as well. And so I now am going to take a drink of water and pass the baton to Matt Den to talk a little bit more about some of these big ideas. If you are on, Matt.
You sure, Senator? You're kind of on a roll there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, as Senator Locke, and thank you everybody for taking time to join us tonight. As Senator Lockman mentioned, the one thing that the Reading Consortium is required to do is to make recommendations about district lines. But we are also allowed to and very much intend to make additional recommendations because I think there's a consensus that just changing the district lines around is not going to be sufficient to ensure what we ultimately want, which is that for kids attending school to have the opportunity to succeed. So some of the ideas that we're considering to include in what ultimately we propose to the state are, as Senator Lockman mentioned, reforms in the state's charter and district coordination practices, changes in revenue practices in order to ensure that schools are adequately funded, and just focusing for a minute on these items in the middle of the slide. Also trying to think about some things that we can be doing in some of the schools that are the subject of all these discussions that are physically in the city of Wilmington that will make the schools exciting to teach in, really attractive for residents in the feeder pattern to send their kids to, and also even exciting for folks who might not live in the feeder pattern to want to choice their kids into. And I know we have a number of folks from Brandywine who are involved in this meeting today. And some of the programs that Brandywine has going on in some of its schools currently, I think, are good examples of that type of dynamic that we would like to see in more schools, where there are special programs going on in the schools that are exciting to the faculty, really attractive to students, and even cause parents from other parts of the district and even outside the district to very much want to choice their kids in to be able to participate in them. So some of the things that we are talking about as possibilities in some of the schools in the city are having access to specialized magnet programs, whether those programs might be targeted at students who are able to perform beyond grade level, students who might have specific disabilities where they could be getting better focused and better skilled attention through a specialized program within a school, programs focused on the arts, programs focused on coding. There's really a whole list of types of specialized programs that we have been talking about as potentially being things that we might want to try to do in schools that were part of this process. We we have listed here trying to have premiums paid to teachers who are willing to teach in these schools and make long-term commitments to be in these schools, so that we could have very stable workforces of some of the highest quality teachers in the state being willing to teach in these schools and be in there for the long haul. High quality early learning programs, again focused on children who might ultimately be attending these schools. And then some of these outside school time programs that Senator Lockman mentioned, we've already been able to get started through a competitive RFP process in some schools, being able to expand them to additional schools and be able to provide kids before school and after school and during the summer with the type of really high quality enrichment programs that can help them to succeed and really extend the school day and school year for them. So these are some of the things that we're hoping to get some feedback from you about tonight. And again, I think it's really helpful to have folks from Brandywine, where you have had some experience with some of these specialized programs in your schools, and would be very interested to hear what the experience has been, both good and what challenges they have presented. So I will turn it back over to Senator Lockman.
Yep, me again. Thank you, Matt. So yeah, again, I mean, we of course, I think are very inspired by, and have always been, by the challenge, right? Everyone's always talking about the challenge of Wilmington schools, but I think, the point I was trying to make earlier as well is that we think there's a real opportunity here where in trying to do something bold, that can give us a great inroads to restructure things in a way that we think will be beneficial to Wilmington schools, that we can do something that's beneficial to all of our schools. And that what we're working on is really about everyone having, being able to continue to enjoy the types of programs perhaps you may already, and want to make sure we know are important to preserve. Big ideas that have been on the list for a long time. That was one of the ones that came up when we were talking to a number of school leaders, the idea that like pre-K, is not a radical idea that we've been talking about for years. Is there a way that we can use this process to catalyze big ideas like that? So we really want this to be about big ideas and opportunities for all students, no matter where in northern Newcastle County they reside and attend schools. And I just hand you this stuff, Ben. He's always ready. That's why it's nice to have a performer on board. So we are right on the important reminders on gathering community input right here. I'm just gonna hand that to you right now.
Evening, everyone. Representative Nominee Chukwu, glad to be here and to share in our community priorities. Our councilwoman couldn't join us this evening. Not sure she's online,
Somewhere around.
but I am glad to present on her behalf our priorities and values for our community engagement process. So the first priorities really are stating that your voice matters and that we want to hear from you. And I'm sure it's been stated that no decision has been made yet in terms of our process and decision making. We are still gathering input, and this conversation really goes toward allowing us to have that community voice that will go toward helping us to really have the core part of our community involved and engaged in this process in order to move forward with the next stage of our plan. So we'll have 45 minutes as a community conversation with 3 guiding questions, with normally 15 minutes per question that will help us to gather input just toward the visioning of quality education that we're trying to build for our children and communities. A few important reminders that this is not the only time that we will gather feedback, because there will be multiple opportunities as this has been the third town hall, but there will still be other community sessions and also other engagement opportunities to provide feedback to the Ready Consortium. Again, as I stated to start, that no decision has been made in terms of changing our boundary lines yet. And we are focused on truly hearing from our community about your values and key opportunities. We will utilize your feedback. Your feedback will be taken into consideration and will become a part of our discussions as we move forward and begin to deliberate about the next steps and considerations for our redistricting options. If you have any questions, you can present them, and they can also be presented as public comment. There's an email that will be shared later where you can also provide that comment that way.
Awesome. I think Taylor Hawk is still on the road, so I'll read the question.
Yes.
Oh, yay, fantastic. All right, so we're gonna hand it to Hawk to preview the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator Lockman. Yes, I am going to preview the 3 questions that will guide our discussion tonight. The first is, what do you think makes a great school and a great school system? The second, what are the educational resources, programs, or services that help meet the needs of all students? And finally, after looking at the list of big ideas in the approved interim plan, which ones stand out to you the most and why? How could these big ideas help schools to better support students? And a reminder for attendees to please use the raised hand function on Zoom or put your responses in the chat. And I'm going to turn it back to Senator Lockman to facilitate the town hall.
I'm gonna let Councilman, Councilman, oh my goodness, took you back for a minute.
Yes.
Representative Chakosha facilitate, because I'm tired.
So our first question is, what do you think makes a great school and a great school system? And we're asking you to please share. And again, we're seeking input. This is our 3rd town hall. Fabulous input, everyone from our superintendents down to teachers and guidance counselors and parents and community members. So we're very interested in hearing your input and your responses to that first question. So anyone, if you're online, you can feel free to type your suggestions or remarks into the chat. And anyone in the room, we would welcome you to give you an opportunity to respond.
I'm looking at the question.
Yeah,
chat.
sorry, you wanna have
sorry.
that chat.
I'm going to speak,
Yes, ma'am.
I happen to now be a teacher, but I'm speaking from a community person.
Perfect.
I think what makes a great school is, my children both went to these schools, neither were here, but I think the leadership that it has to be quality leadership from the superintendent on down. It has to be people who are committed and care. I prefer people who are closer to the community than not, although I don't think it's a requirement. But I also think that a great school system has to take into account all of the children that are constituents or scholars in their school, and not just components of that. Because I'm seeing sort of a separation of, these are the kids we're really gonna focus on versus let's just teach them required curriculum here, whether they learn it or not.
You wanna say more? I mean, I don't know, can I do more? You do not have to. But I thought
It says, it speaks for itself, I think, I hope. But I'm inspired because this is 5 years teaching. I have corporate first career for a long period of time. And so I am totally committed until I retire. And I may not retire because I love it so much. But what I also see is not a lot of love for these babies who are not, inclined to easily get the information, who need a little bit more, who require us to think about, not trauma informed, because I think we go a little far to the left with that. But I do believe we have to consider the things that are happening in their lives, but we also have to hold them accountable and teach them that you are responsible for everything you do. And I don't know if, I don't have the answer, but I think that's what makes a great school.
True.
And if I can just add on to that, so I'm just a sort of a new parent,
here, and my child is in public school, Wilmington, 6 months. And one of the things that I had issues with, or thinks makes a better school is, transparency.
Mm.
And integrity, so from the leadership, the district on down, making sure that they're communicating. And making sure that they're being transparent with their communication, and not me always having to reach out. To get answers to questions that involves my child.
Senator Lockman, there's a raised hand online.
Oh, great. Kristen Ligon. All right, let's make sure she can unmute and speak up.
Can you hear me? So I am a public school teacher, and I want to agree with a lot of what was previously said about great schools providing opportunities for all students, not just the small handful of students that we have maybe deemed more successful or more worthy to begin with. And I think great schools go that extra mile to level the playing field for the students entering the school, so that regardless of the student's background, they all have the same opportunities to achieve, regardless of what their goals are, whether it may be college or career readiness. And I think that, schools prioritizing, teacher input, and really a community feeling, input from every stakeholder, and not a top-down approach, but very much like a bottom-up approach, community members, teachers, everybody being involved in all the processes in the school.
Thank you. Really appreciate that one. What else? There's no, answers would be big and broad and, or small and specific. And so like, anyone else thought I might have seen a chance to get, I'd love to hear from students. Oh my gosh, you would make my whole
I'm on
day.
the spot here, but I told them,
Yes.
they're telling me to say something, but they're the one that's in it every day.
That's okay, you can write it
Yes.
down in a note and pass it to us later. That would be fine too.
You wanna write it down?
We won't even look at you.
And I say we're definitely gonna be recording anything that you put in the chat as well. Would love to be able to highlight them as well. So I've opened up my computer so I can see some more of them. I'm seeing, some comments mentioning like a preference for smaller class sizes, that currently there are tend to be larger class sizes that make it more difficult to manage. A lot of people talking about having demonstrable opportunities to have a voice, like students and families and educators to have a voice.
I like that one.
The voice. Oh,
No, I'm
what was it?
sorry.
Sorry, chat, we're all collectively
I'm
reading.
reading.
So, let's see, which one was it?
It was talking about, and I don't agree with revoking charters.
Oh,
But it said something about looking at the charters of these schools that are really not doing their role. And there's one that is huge here in this district, and they seem to continue, and I spoke on their behalf one year. But they haven't gotten it together, and they're still churning out these kids.
interesting.
I don't know how.
Well, and choice and charter policy reform is like very much in the big picture area too, so we could certainly come back to that maybe more specifically then.
Mhm.
But this is also an open conversation, so people can say whatever they want. That's interesting, I would love to hear more about that. A lot about the passion of the educators and the leaders. A place where paras and staff are respected and well-trained. So I'm seeing a lot of comments focusing on that.
I had another.
Absolutely.
Component from, this is my teacher hat. What I'm seeing, and I'm in middle school, so I know high school has a different sort of layout. But for middle school, there aren't too many things that they do that inspire them or get them excited. They're just these required classes and a few electives that they might enjoy, but there's not enough options. Like there's no, I'm not saying anybody wants coding, but if I want, I would love to have had coding. When I was in a middle school, I took a class called business law. It was an elective because I was in an honors program. It was such a relief to just have brainless thinking. And so there was, even though it wasn't quite brainless, but it kept me focused on, oh, I kind of like school. But if all they do, and particularly for the underperforming, because I'm also a special education teacher, there are, when you can't read and write in the classroom, it's not very happy. It's not a happy place. And so I try to give them a little bit of joy, but having something that inspires them, that brings them joy during the middle of the day might be helpful.
That enrichment piece, enrichment. Okay, I was not watching the clock in terms of how long we were spending on this segment, but I know we're only supposed to spend 15 minutes, so maybe. And of course, you can continue to speak to this question, particularly if you have access to the written chat. You can be answering any question at any time. We will work through it. But I think we're good to move to question 2. Yeah.
So question 2. What are the educational resources, programs, or services that help to meet the needs of all students?
And I'll add a little extra context here in case you're like, well, I've never been heard of. I think in particular, we're not necessarily looking at like a deficit orientation of like what's missing, but like we also know that there are things that are great that are already happening, and it's really important as policymakers and pursuing change that we don't do things that disrupt or undermine things that are really great and working. So like we want to make sure that that kind of thing gets noted here as well.
I've talked a lot, so.
No, this is okay.
But the one thing that I will say I find as a resource, and some might not think it's an educational resource, but the fact that kids have competitive athletics and not just clubs. Some are clubs, some are not, but really help meet the needs of all students because anyone can participate. And some of them who are getting to participate here at our school, there are rules around behavior and structure that during the season, they follow to the letter. And I see the difference of their behavior when the season is going on and when the season is not. And so when I talk to some of my kids, I'm like, what if we said you have to do this all year? So, sure.
Yes,
I'll speak, I'm on the operations committee, but when they talk about.
and you can feel free to introduce yourself to the people.
John Reed, Brandywine School District,
Yeah.
when we talk about resources and programs, a lot of the DOE capacity numbers around schools, if we want smaller class sizes, we have to relook at the capacities of schools,
Yeah.
especially in the city. And we talk about resources and programs. I'm glad that there was a comment on extracurricular activities. I think a lot of people in the northern part of the state look down south where they all play on beautiful turf fields. And we play on, we're doing the best we can. And I just think that there has to be looked at the state holistically. And we need some more of those resources up here. I can talk for hours about it if you ever want to talk, but I just think there are ways to fix this and we have to have the will to want to do it.
I just want to note for anyone listening, that was the first time I saw a student presumably vigorously nodding. So you got a big thumbs up on that comment.
I think one program I want to call out that we're using in all of our high schools is Avid. That is probably one of the most effective programs that I've seen. And I've been on and off board since 1993. So I'm talking from a little bit of experience,
Yeah.
but it literally gives kids who maybe weren't even thinking about higher education to get them psyched and ready for higher education, to help train them to be ready to go to higher learning, because you're just in class, you're not necessarily gonna get that from the class, because they're teaching course material. But they're teaching you the how and the why, and it's really been very powerful for anyone.
And I'll agree and take a slightly different point though. I think maybe an opportunity with resources or programming. I say this a lot, but we talk about college and career readiness a lot, but I don't think we do enough for career readiness. And if you look at like what Cecil County School District is doing, and Dr. Handler there is leading their CTE program, like the stuff that they're doing, partnerships with Delmarva, like they're doing heavy career readiness that engages a whole nother group of students, I think, that we might be missing here. So I would love to see in traditional public schools, pathways that specifically target trades or some type of career readiness that maybe are offered at the VOTEC on a larger scale, but if we offered some type of pathways in every public school that targeted there's a whole nother group I think we're missing by not having that in every school.
That's cool. Cecil County, and who was the name of the person you said?
Dr. Heather Handler.
That's something that our league state Representative Bolden mentions all the time about our former Howard High School, about how Howard used to have career tracks and now it's VOTEC, and although it's VOTEC has college prep classes but yet our traditional schools don't have that same thing, so it creates this unequitable system even within our own public school system.
In fact, when I worked at Howard High School at the beginning of the 2000s, 99 through 2001, we were literally preparing for the DSTP testing to try to make sure that we got good marks, because we wanted to attract those students who were college bound. And, one of the things, and then this is on question 3, which is big ideas, but maybe look at putting VOTECs back to half a day so they could have twice as many vocational seats available. Just throwing it out
We're here
there.
for bold ideas. We are here for it.
Just
We're
throwing.
coming. I see a couple hands online, so we won't want to leave you guys behind. Kristen and then Maddie. So Kristen, we'll go back to you first.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about, I think that the programs that we have that are working really well in our schools are things like the schools that have free breakfast and lunches for all of our students, as well as the school-based health and wellness centers that provide counseling, physicals, vaccinations, all of these services that our students may not have available to them outside of school, but that get our kids fed and healthy, that allows us to compete with the more affluent students at other schools or even within the same schools. I also agree that the career pathways being available in these traditional high schools at a level that they really prepare students for their careers. I teach at McCain High School, and I think that our model has been really successful with our career pathways. We have a lot of strong career pathways that come with certifications, as well as AP courses and college preparation. And the person that said earlier, half-day VOTEC, half-day traditional high school, I think would be an amazing model, because what we've done in placing these career pathways in these VOTEC schools is we've taken kids away from our public schools, which takes funding away from our public schools, when we could be giving them everything in one place and not forcing them to go through the very difficult and confusing school choice process.
What we're here for. Thank you, Kristen. Maddie Geller.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, my name is Maddie Geller. I'm a Wilmington resident. I live in the Brandywine part of the city of Wilmington, and I work in the rest of the city of Wilmington. I was thinking about question 2, what are programs that help meet the needs of all students? I do want to shout out the school that I work in, which is Lewis Dual Language Elementary. We are the only school that the entire school is a dual language immersion program. So every student in the entire school has 50% of their day taught in English, 50% of their day taught in Spanish. And we're pretty unique in that we have We even miss. Speaker? Think
Losing
this
you,
program-
losing you a little bit.
Is that,
No.
let's try again in a minute.
Maybe better?
And she can also put her comment in the chat.
Yeah, you can put your comment in the chat too. I think we heard the beginning of talking about work at Lewis dual language, and we definitely want to hear more. So when you get into a better spot, raise your hand again, or type it up. Anyone else online? Or in the room, want to add to that one? I'm not sure. I know everyone's looking at the chat.
You're good about that.
This is town hall, like, everyone, it's for conversation for all people to talk about what their thoughts are and to hear feedback from others about those thoughts. That's what it's all about. Oh, my colleague, our colleague, Senator Buxton, has his hand raised. He's a member of the Reading Consortium, representing the minority caucus in the state senate. Senator Buxton? If you're able to unmute and contribute, please do so.
Yeah, I'm down here now. Hey guys, I'm representing down here in Kent County. I don't want to have a comment. I want to listen. And what I want to say is I really appreciate the comments that are being made. There's a lot of smart folks who are making comments that line up with a lot of things that I think are impactful in education. So the question is, how do we do it? But keep the comments coming because there's a lot of good things that are being said. And I'm appreciative of listening, even if I am an hour away. So thanks.
Thank you, Senator. I'm glad to know you're listening in, and that is our whole charge as the Reading Consortium. I think we're hoping that what we can do is take what we hear and figure out, ways that we can work with experts and analysts to build a system that can encourage the things we say we like and discourage the things that we want to see less of. There are a lot of comments coming in, which is great, but it makes it hard for us to say them again. It looks like Maddie might be in a better spot, and if not, we have Nora Durant on the line as well. So Maddie, want to try again?
Hi, is this better?
Much.
Okay. I'll start over because I don't know what you could hear or not. But my name is Maddie Geller. I'm a community member living on the Brandywine side of Wilmington. I work in the Red Clay side of Wilmington. When I'm thinking about programs that do work well to meet the needs of all students, I think of my own school, Lewis Dual Language Elementary. We're the only full dual language immersion public school. The entire school, all students have 50% of their day taught in English, 50% taught in Spanish. And I think of that as being an extremely supportive environment, especially for our learners who are newcomers to Delaware or newcomers to the United States. I think of if I moved to a new place and nobody spoke my language, and then I found a school where half of my school day was taught in a language I understood with people that had similar cultures to me, that would just be such a great feeling. So I love that we're able to welcome our newcomers in that way. I do also have a few questions, I guess, that maybe they'll be addressed later, but I'm wondering when we were talking about some magnet programs earlier, if the consortium would consider, would this be entire schools that would be magnet programs? Or would it be portions of schools that are magnet programs? I bring that up because I feel like in some schools where part of the school is a traditional, so to speak, elementary school and part is a magnet program, I think there are equity considerations in terms of that, if it's not the entire school that it has access to this special programming. So I think that's something that, I would like to explore further if that's something that the consortium is thinking of doing, or if they're thinking of taking entire schools and making them magnet programs, as in not feeder schools, just magnet programs. And my other question is if the consortium is going to consider access to a comprehensive high school within the city limits of the city of Wilmington. And I know that's a big question with no easy answer, but those are just things that come to mind when I think about what's been discussed so far. And I think all the comments so far have been wonderful, and thank you for having this forum.
Absolutely, we'll have more too. Do you want to speak to either of them?
No, I think both of those are great points and have been raised and will definitely be a part of the conversation as we go forward. in really looking at the high school option, the comprehensive high school that is shared across the city, figuring out a way to provide the higher education, the secondary education here for our students in the city with some kind of configuration to where it probably possibly shared as a comprehensive high school. And so definitely a part of our discussion.
Yeah.
And it's one that we're working with, a part of our high school, I guess our think tank is working with the Wilmington Learning Collaborative that in part of their charge was to look at the high school option.
Yeah.
Where our works our works and our charges are going in parallel direction, but some of them overlap. And that's a thing that, well, an area of focus that they have that is definitely in line with our charge as well.
Yeah, and I think it is in our code to
Yes.
analyze the need for a comprehensive school in the city of Wilmington, and I think the secondary school question is like a county-wide one as well. There's implications when we talk about shifting the Christina footprint out of Christina, that has implications for utilization of capacity in existing schools elsewhere in the county. So these are all things that we have to be thinking about holistically, just because that's the realistic way to consider them. And definitely we can also talk more about the magnet question when we get into choice and charter policy, if you guys want to say more on that, but Nora has been waiting for a while. Nora?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've already said this in the chat, but one of the resources that you would be able to figure out if you visited our school, Lewis Dual Language Elementary, would be instructional paras, especially in the primary grades. My colleague Luce tells me that the state used to fund that, and it's a huge need. I've seen it myself over the last 10 years in my school. And another comment I made that I feel like is becoming more and more important is having dedicated coaching for all of the new grown-ups that we're funneling into our high needs schools, who may not have had any teacher training at all before they got here. So the burden ends up falling on their partner teachers. I've sent one of my children through my school, and I'm about to register my second child. I want to support my public school, but it's been really sad to see the piecemeal way that we staff our classrooms at schools like mine. And if we're not going to be able to find enough trained teachers to consistently teach our kids, then we need to provide dedicated building-based coaching for those educators who do find themselves in our classrooms.
Can I add to that? Because that's what I read. I read her text, her chat, and was so happy because I came through an alternative program. So I got a master's in education later in life, and when I got to school, I didn't have anybody to help me. If it wasn't for, and this is a commending thing to the district, there is, and go pat her on the back tomorrow, there is a coach, a special education coach, and her partner, Mr. David Walls, but the coach is Carolyn Morgera. She stood by me since the moment I got here and helped me that I think I can do it with my eyes closed now, but it was all, I can ask her any question, anytime, anywhere. And if I didn't have that person, it would have been impossible. So I tell all the new teachers who come here, please utilize your coach. They don't do it. And so I'm watching them do what I did, fish out of water, paddling without her assistance. It is critical for that coach to be a partnership with brand new teachers coming out of ARTC programs.
We're probably at time for this question. Again, if you're online, keep putting things in the chat if you have more thoughts on that one. And there will be opportunities to capture any thoughts that come to you after tonight. This is just our warm up. So we'll move to question 2.
Question 3. After looking at the list of big ideals in the approved interim plan, which areas or which ones stand out to you the most and why? How could these big ideals help schools be better or better support our children. And some of the big ideals that are mentioned are specialized magnet programs for elementary schools, high quality early learning for pre-K students, premium pay for educators in high need schools are some of the big areas that we're focusing.
We go back to your original interim approved plan, which I see there in blue.
Yes, oh,
One thing you mentioned is to get Christina out of the city of Wilmington. I would say that that's an urgent need, not something that can sit and wait. And perhaps, maybe if there's some way, the consortium can act immediately to remove those schools that are currently Christina schools and give them to the Wilmington Learning Collaborative and Dr. Burgos and her team, so that they can run those 1 through 8 schools and including the kindergarten center. And then we'll figure out some way to make sure those kids have got good school choice for high schools, to get extra coaching as to which high school they want to go, and then give them transportation, whatever high school they want to go to. Because the kids that are in Pritchard and in Bayard, they are struggling, and there's a big ocean between here and Glasgow. It's called I-95. Y'all got caught in it today, so you know what I'm talking about. And those kids have to go down there every day to those schools in Christina, and that is a crying shame. That needs to stop now, not 3 years from now, because one of my frustrations with working in education has always been, yeah, we've got these great plans, they're gonna come into effect 3 or 4 years from now. What about the kids who are there now? What happens to them? You know, that's always my concern. That we're bringing these things in, that's great, but we're missing a whole group of kids that are just gonna go through. So I think you should try to look at doing something right now. Wilmington Learning Collaborative is a great place to start. I think Dr. Burgos the collaborative could really use an opportunity to show what they can do by taking control of those schools and removing them from the Christina School District.
I definitely appreciate the comment, and greatly concurs with your statement, especially in terms of the work of Dr. Burgos. What I found to be the challenge, unfortunately, with WLC is the MOU that was crafted to guide what they can and cannot do is very limiting. So it doesn't give them the power and authority to do exactly what we're saying needs to be done. So unless we're gonna have a new MOU, which the first one took
oh my gosh.
exactly to get done, and
Yeah.
it was so stripped down
Yeah.
that we will be having the same conversation. And I'm sure it was mentioned when we started Reading, the senator and I had a very aggressive timeline. Everything you just mentioned about watching these children continue to leave our school system ill prepared because of the education they're receiving. We wanted to that was exactly what we wanted to avoid. But this is such a daunting, lofty task that I believe our actions are deliberate, and we're being very intentional to say when we make this next step, we want to do so in a way that we believe is being done in a manner that will lead to success, not us saying in a few years later, oh, we didn't get this right.
Yeah, and I think we've always been very mindful from the time that we reauthorized the body consortium, that we really see ourselves as like the long-term structural state policy change makers, and that we were fully open-minded to something that can make faster change. And because we know just even getting the work done to have a proposal, let alone the time it would then take to implement one, we know is even optimistically not a short turnaround time. So when we were considering the interim plan, there were conversations about exactly what you described, and I think those conversations are ongoing, and
Yes.
there's some surprising
Sure.
complexities to what makes that difficult, for better or worse. So I think that's an idea on the table, so I appreciate you for elevating it.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think especially the examples that were on the bottom of the screen. We think about like early education, but I don't know if anything would be more impactful than incentivizing our best teachers to be in the highest need schools, right? So we have great teachers, and no fault that is very natural if all else being equal, like to go to the place that would be easier on your day. And I mean, it's natural. Who wouldn't, you know, if you have to choose from two jobs for the same pay and one of them's a little bit harder than the other, it's natural to take. So I don't know if anything would make a bigger change faster than incentivizing the best teachers to be in front of the highest needs kids.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Kristen.
I was gonna say, Senator Lockman, we had a request, if
Oh,
folks can announce themselves before speaking.
Yeah,
identify
sorry,
yourself.
I'll remind you. Let's try to remember to say our names in the room as we're speaking, so people online can have a sense of who's in the room.
Alex and Jamie with the Brandywine School District. The revenue policy is the one that I honed in on because I wonder how many entities are going to have to be involved with that? County, state, federal, local, but also how many additional people will become animated because of it? Because a lot of the things we're talking about, people will be animated if they have kids in the program, if they have had kids in the program. When you start talking about the revenue policy, that pool is going to expand greatly. And it's an important policy and it's something that can be discussed and should be discussed. But I do think compared to some of these other ones, there is going to be a different audience for that than for the other ones.
Very, very good point. Very good point. And also something that I think, you know, bodies like the Public Education Funding Commission are also taking on as well. So some of that, you know, could be reflected in their work and we might be in a position to say, hey, we believe in X, Y, Z, but may not be like attached to a proposal that we're advancing. Wasn't sure if we want, I know we got a lot of chatter kind of around the nuances of magnet programs, I think, and then also some commentary on charter schools. So I see this all as choice policy personally, but I know there have been some questions around magnets. I know Matt maybe wanted to add a little bit more color to his perspective on that, perhaps, or maybe we have additional comments or questions from the room. So just sort of recentering that one for a minute, looking at my watch. Kristen, I don't know if you wanted to speak to or something else.
You said, maybe not so much speak to, but I know that there are folks in the room from Brandywine, and I know that Brandywine has had some experience with, you know, magnet programs within schools. And yeah, I think that the concerns that have been expressed are legitimate and that there are things that if we were to recommend that we would want to address as part of that recommendation. And I guess I was just curious if folks who are from Brandywine, who have had some experience with the IB programs, the gifted programs within schools, if they had any thoughts about if those equity issues had been effectively addressed, if so, how they had been, if not, how they might be, but if there was any sort of firsthand feedback about addressing that issue in schools that already had in-school magnets.
Anyone? You don't have to. Just let that percolate and, you know, definitely a question I think people would love to hear the answer.
It is a question because you know, the gifted is in this building, one. I don't know if there's another one, but
Yeah.
and my daughter was an IB at Tally. Well, I didn't notice inequity as a parent because my children were doing what they, you know, they had mom to push and pull and require and demand. But as a teacher now, I'm starting to see that if you don't have, that's an absolute, I don't want to be absolute about anything because it's not always all the time.
But in your experience.
But there have been some experiences that if there are not advocating parents, that you may not get all the things that you might need. You don't know, you don't find out, and nobody's telling you about it. And then that child doesn't have access to that because they're not aware.
That's the same with choice and charter.
Yes, it is.
Sure.
It's a concentration of social and political capital.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I would just add in terms of the last question about what's working good and how do we replicate that almost, but to say, when you said having a parent that can advocate for their child. Well, to me, it's about how, the other side of it to me is having a community advocating or in having a system that is advocating
Yeah.
for the child. And those are the resources. And I say that as a lifelong social worker, knowing that if there were, and not just saying I need a social worker, but having that social worker in the building that's connected to the school, connected to the children, connected to the community, it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. And that's where we begin to have those advocates within the system that find those children and don't let them fall through the cracks. And as much as I love my profession is often very devalued within certain systems, including at times the education system.
yeah. And what your comment means a lot to me, having kind of gotten into all this as a parent advocate and being like a really rabid one. And then being like, well, if I just teach other parents how to do that, everything will be fine. And then I realized, well, I felt like I was just like someone who learned to be a mountain climber, trying to teach other people to climb a mountain. And I was like, started to realize maybe it doesn't need to be a mountain to feel like you're getting the best out of the system all the time. And it does often feel like that. And I don't know if that's a city thing, or if I've talked to other parents who are not in the city who sometimes feel the stress of like, oh my God, to get the best out of this, I've got to do this, that, and the other thing. And it feels really hard. And it doesn't seem like maybe it needs to be.
I waited in a line at the district office at 4 a.m, the day choice opened.
I remember those.
That was me.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think you talked about the incentives of like, you can't blame an educator for wanting to be in a climate and a building that feels more comfortable, and you can't blame parents for taking up the opportunities that are presented to them as well. I think our job as state policymakers is to create a system that like puts incentives, appropriate incentives for behaviors that benefit everyone in the system.
Because as he was saying, you really do want to keep the great teachers in the environments that need them most.
Yeah.
And why would you make me stay somewhere where there's a lot of chaos?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I can make the same pay in a place where there's no chaos.
And the world wants to know, can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Miss Thomas, Yvonne Thomas, just a parent.
And
Not just the
hate when
parent,
people
but
say
happy to
that.
have
I
you.
can't
These
stand
town
it.
halls work for the parents, so we're thankful for the ones who showed up.
Sorry, Kristen, we've left you hanging for a while and we have not too many more minutes here, so let you weigh in.
No problem. Sorry, I have, can you hear me all right? My headphones died, so I'm just talking on my phone speaker now. So I think, we've talked about the magnets and the kids having good experiences and all of that. And I think we also need to address on that list was, school choice and charters. And I think a big issue with charters in Delaware and especially in northern Newcastle County is that charters were originally conceived of as labs to find teaching methods that worked and then be brought back to the public schools. But instead, they've become these 30-year institutions that cherry pick the students that have involved parents and have the resources to navigate the school choice process. I just went through it myself with my 5-year-old daughter because Pulaski is our feeder school. And we all know the problems that Christina School District is dealing with right now. And basically, we take the kids that have the means and we put them in a situation where they have more resources and then they get better test scores and we pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, what great schools. But when we're taking populations where we have the neediest kids and then we're judging them against kids that don't have those same needs, it's just full of inequities. And I think we see that in the charters, we see that in magnet programs, because even if the magnet programs are within a certain school, those kids are still separated. And so it's not equitable if it's separate. I mean, didn't we all learn that in history class? Separate but equal is not equal. So I think that's just something that we need to examine in our school choice programs. And I think pre-K, affordable pre-K for everyone would be a big part of that as well, because preschool is expensive. And unless your child qualifies for special education and is able to get into a high needs program, many kids that don't have the means are coming to school far behind their peers who have parents that read to them or were able to pay for pre-K. So I think those two things really are working against us in equity and need to be at the top of our priority list.
Thank you, thank you. Absolutely, I love it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a student myself at Springer Middle School currently. I was a part of the Tally Middle School IB program, and I noticed that the curriculum was the exact same, except that we just had to do outside of school, like volunteering and stuff. But the kids were not well behaved, and we had not enough teachers for the program. And I choiced into Springer because I had issues at the school. And the IB program was not what I was expecting. I was expecting more like harder classes and like to challenge myself, and they didn't challenge me as much as I thought they would. And now I'm having the problem at Springer where I'm having not enough teachers and teachers that aren't qualified for their job, but kept in their job because we have not enough teachers.
That is a huge issue. Thank you for sharing that. Great job, Rob. I see Maddie again and Senator Buxton. I will mention we have like 5 minutes.
I'm not sure if they lowered their.
Oh, maybe you guys just didn't lower your hands. Okay.
But there were some like just related questions in the chat. I don't know if they wanted
So,
to
do you
speak
think
now or
transition?
public comment. It's about like the impact on like administrators and educators, like how do they feel about the redistricting plan? I don't know if like the person wants to come up with you, but.
Okay, well, maybe we should save that for public comment. We are getting to time, and I'm sure a lot of us get excited about talking about this stuff. I know I do. I can do this for hours, and I look forward to being able to do this again. But again, let me get my script out so I don't say the wrong thing. But I think we'll wrap this one up. I think we've heard some really good inputs on all of the items, and we are going to put up a QR code at the end. So if you want to add more, you certainly can fill out the post town hall survey, and when we have new dates for more town halls, come back, get back into the conversation again. We can pick up where we left off. It would be great. We have a couple of things that are already on the calendar, but we don't have our town halls up yet. We have a full body meeting next Tuesday, 6 o'clock in the evening at Del Tech, the downtown Wilmington campus. We have like sort of regular business to attend to, such as we have to do our budget plan, things like that, but we will also be talking about what we heard at the town halls, and doing some confirmations around what we heard at our prior retreat that we had for our subcommittees to talk about, you know, our thoughts on the directions that are starting to present themselves with potential redistricting proposals. So absolutely encourage you to tune in on Tuesday as well. We may have an update from the Public Education Funding Commission, maybe not, we'll see. And then our next writing subcommittee retreat is in mid-June, and these are public meetings. They are not hybrid style. We haven't really figured out how to do that online in an appropriate way, but everyone is welcome to come and be part of those retreats. We had a few members of the community there last time, and it felt really positive and really constructive. And of course, just keep an eye out for dates for new town halls. You can get on solutionsfordelawareschools.com. Make sure you're on our email list. If you're still on Facebook, go and follow our Facebook page. I don't think we're on any other platforms at this time actively, and just try to keep up with us that way. I think before I move to public comment, I see Tika's hand is up.
Yeah, and I was also gonna mention, and Haley put it in the chat, if anyone had any additional questions, like, we'll also have a survey feedback survey at the end of the town hall, but if you also have any other questions, feel free to email solutionsfordelawareschools@gmail.com. and we can help, answer any of those questions too.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I think she can put her hand down.
Oh, I
but
still have
so-
a question, sorry.
Okay, quickly.
The community engagement survey, is there a closing date on that or will it remain open?
Elena?
I believe it'll remain.
Yeah,
open.
we don't have any intention to close it at this time, so.
Okay.
It was probably stay open until we're done. So I think with that, I will move us into public comment. Unlike our open conversation, we're gonna listen to public comment, specifically feedback about process if you have it, and probably not respond to questions. So just bear that in mind. We're gonna do sort of traditional public comment. We will take it on, but not respond. So with that, do we have anyone who'd like to offer public comment? You can raise your hand and we will call on you. Anyone in the room? Yeah.
You actually addressed a lot of the things I was gonna say, but just a couple of things. First, I do want to thank you for scheduling this. I know we had talked briefly about the need for active public engagement, so I appreciate that. I support the need for redistricting, especially fixing the Christina mess. So my question I'll present, I guess, is and maybe it's on the website, but when will the community see a specific draft of a plan or plans that might be moving forward for the full vote? Will that be at that next full body meeting, or when will the community be able to see that? And then just one other comment, you had talked about the consistency in especially the families being transient within the city and the different districts and moving around and a lack of consistency. I just think the only solution to that is a single district within the city. So even if there is only two, it's still gonna impact, I think, a lot of people as they move around. Anyway, but thank you anyway for
Thank you.
scheduling the meeting.
Definitely come to the full body meeting. A lot of what you asked for will kind of depend on what happens at the full body meetings on some level.
I'm sorry, Jason Heller.
Sorry.
Brandywine.
Sorry, I said I wouldn't respond, so.
Alex and Jamie from Brandywine. My question is with regards to the December timeline, December deadline. How detailed are you thinking, or let me just put it this way, how detailed do you think things will be in December? And what I mean by that is questions of teachers' contracts, administrators' contracts, property, things of like nitty-gritty logistical questions regarding any sort of redistricting. Is that when it's going to be implemented, or is there going, or not implemented, but proposed, or is there going to be a proposal and then subsequently closer detail onto those type of financial logistical questions? So just.
I'm gonna try and respond, but I will respond. So the 13 stipulations touch on a lot of what you're saying. So there has to be like a reasonable amount of detail on those at that time.
Ralph Ackerman, Brandywine. One of the things I think that's within your 13 stipulations is to be as little disruption as possible. But we should keep in mind the fact that in 1968, the Educational Advancement Act of 1968 is what caused everything that's happening today, because that implemented the desegregation case, which created the Newcastle County Combined School District, which had 4 areas, yada, 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 here we are. Bottom line is, when the Neighborhood Schools Act came into effect in 2000, Brandywine did not resegregate our schools and immediately shift everybody around. We have many children who live in the city who come to Carcroft, Lancashire, and other schools out in our county. So as a district, we are contiguous and we are whole. And my only advice would be minimize the disruption to the Brandywine School District, because we don't want to be back in a federal court having to deal with this again.
Could you just explain minimize, trying to.
I don't know how to exactly, I don't know what plan, until you come up with a plan, to tell you how to minimize the disruption. All I know is right now, we have children that don't all go to Harlan. We haven't put all the city children into Harlan, because A, Harlan's not big enough. And B, we believe in socioeconomic diversity, and that's what we do have in our district. That's how that was the plan we submitted. And Dan Rich, if you recall, talked about the plan that Brandywine submitted to fulfill the Neighborhood Schools Act back in 2000. So I'm just saying, keep that in mind as you look at us. We didn't do what Red Clay did. We didn't do what Christina did. We didn't do what Colonial did. We did it a little bit differently. We tried to be as equitable as possible across our district based on socioeconomic diversity.
I appreciate the sentiment and being a city or the city representative for Brandywine, greatly appreciative of that. And I would add, not to, as my senator said, we're not commenting, but to say the other side of the argument to me is that in terms of our other districts and just that act itself, the immoral, the racist, the blatant inequitable policy that the Neighborhood Schools Act was, in that it needs to be rectified. And it's gonna take all of us to fix it. And all of us includes Brandywine, and that's, I guess, why we're having this conversation, but thank you for stating.
I have a question.
Yes.
Brandy, parent. Dashboard, where is that?
The equity dashboard?
Yes.
Well, the best way to say that, we still have funds waiting to be implemented on that. The state has changed to a new student data system in the last like year and a half or so. What is it called? Infinite Campus?
Yes.
And it has completely interrupted the process that we were pursuing to have the dashboard prepared. But we're not.
What's your data set for that?
Sorry?
What were your data sets before that for your dashboard?
Oh, I can't answer that offhand, but, I mean, I'm not even sure that it was like fully locked and loaded to that level. I think it had to be integrated with the student data system. So we have to wait now for the new data system to come all the way online to like you can have it be a live thing.
Because I started pulling in some of the data sets and I've seen in Brandywine School District where the schools are getting more and more students. And my biggest concern is it going to cause more overcrowding in the schools?
I mean, I think that's a consideration.
And I assumed you guys had that as a data set that you would analyze on the surrounding schools, like which schools are already over capacity. Are you guys looking at that data?
I think that's actually a stipulation.
Yes.
Okay, do you have that data set?
I know there are some data in terms of
Look at the-
each one of the districts that serve the city of Wilmington, we can tell you how many students are Wilmington proper students that attend these schools per district. And so we can
Just so you know, the school actually as a whole, not including, like, there's kids outside of Wilmington also in these schools. Are they, I can see it already. She complains about the hallways already being overcrowded. Is this plan going to impact more students coming into an already overcrowded school?
I'm speaking generally, that would not be our intent. Our intent is truly to have schools that are equitable, and if it's working here, we have schools that aren't working, and we're trying to take what works and share with the schools that aren't working in a way that involves all of us.
And
I do, that's all I want to make sure is that you guys are looking at the data of what schools, you're not just you're pulling
Not
out
at
all
all.
the different districts.
Not at all, and I know my senator says it all the time, that this is far from us just wanting to change this line here on 30th Street, to say 30th Street is no longer the
It
boundary.
makes sense. I've seen the math. It makes sense to pull it out, but as long as we're doing it where we're not just going to shove these kids into already overcrowded schools.
And like you said, I think that stipulation is under the operational impact
Yes.
subcommittee, and I glazed over this when I was talking about our process and our existing subcommittees. All subcommittees have representatives from every potentially impacted school district as members of those subcommittees to ask for the data that's needed, to help analyze the data that's needed, to ultimately turn it into answers to the stipulation. So this is definitely, it's very much on the list. And there are representatives from all school districts that are right there at the table as part of these conversations as we develop those. And even furthermore, there will be opportunities for everyone to see and question that data. I'm getting a bunch of texts about what data we do have. I'm not gonna read them all. But we certainly have a lot of data that's been on the list that we already have access to, or maybe are working on getting access to, but
Yeah, because they're all different puzzles, so you kind of do need that dashboard overview before you put any plan into place. What is it, December you're looking?
Well, that's not an implementation date. That's like, this is the proposal that we are putting forward as the one that we've concluded as the best one. It has to go through multiple,
Right.
steps of approval. Implementation, I guess, will be spelled out in that proposal for however many years we think that needs to be taking. Okay. Thank you for the question.
And Senator Lockman also mentioned that landscape analysis too. That's a part of the work.
Yes, I mentioned the landscape analysis, which also has all kinds of data points involved that have been derived from the subcommittees, and that update is gonna be a big part of the retreat itself. It was previously, so you'll get to see the kind of data that they're providing. So, and I know we're over time. Thank you all for still being here with us. We're gonna keep collecting public comment. We're gonna try to not be in Q&A mode now. So we're gonna ask you to help us not be in Q&A mode. Don't ask us any questions. But you can email us. We're here afterwards. We will answer them. Or try to answer them in the chat as well. So back to public comment. Are there any more hands in the room?
I have a comment, and it's trying not to make it a question.
You can ask the question.
Is since December is the date for when you're going to deliver this plan, what is the ideal implementation? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Just no idea. And that's a question. How do I make it not a question? So my brain, when Aunt Ray was here, I came to a couple of the Learning Collabs meeting and then the Reading Consortium. And in that beginning, I felt like they were talking about a Wilmington district early on. So if there are districts that are concerned about I read concern from the conversation from Mr. Ackerman. I hear overcrowding concerns. I hear concerns. If there are concerns from districts, have we considered not making it, parsing it to them and making it a holistic district on its own? And this is Yvonne Thomas.
And we promise we weren't gonna talk.
Right, he's looking at me like, I really wanna ask you, but I'm not gonna ask you.
I mean, I'm gonna say that there have always been a range of options on the table, everything from a city district to a county district. There are options in between. We talked about them at our last retreat. We will talk about them at our upcoming meeting and retreat. We are working on modeling to help inform the wisdom of some of the different options in terms of providing the right resources and configuration to support the visions that we're talking about. And I'm just gonna say that.
Yep.
I'm gonna really try not to.
I'm gonna leave it there.
Comment?
John Scorbut, Brandywine. Thank you for being here tonight as well. I appreciate the engagement that you and Mr. Heller had to kind of get us to this point. I just wanted to express that with a subcommittee dedicated to community engagement, I'm disappointed that it's taken 12 months of the 18-month timeline to get us to this point.
All right, I think we have some people online, Maddie and Monica. Maddie, we'll go to you first and then Monica.
Hello, I promise to just have a comment, no questions. My name is Maddie Geller. I'm a city resident and a city educator. And I just wanted to underscore, I know this has come up other times tonight in the chat and in comments, just how important teacher retention is to this conversation. I was talking with some friends the other day about how teacher recruitment and teacher retention have kind of been lumped together, but really they're two separate things, right? When we think about recruiting people who are new to the profession, whether that's new graduates, people who go through alternate programs, that's a little bit different than retaining teachers, certified teachers we already have who are in the school system. I think both are important, but I would like to especially emphasize for our schools in Wilmington, the retention of teachers who are already working in our schools and are already doing fantastic things in our schools. I think looking into different monetary compensation would be something very beneficial. I know that there are some roads to cross with that from a teacher contract and union perspective. I'm happy to go on that road at this point as someone who's very active in the union. This is my 4th year of teaching, so I still consider myself an early career educator. And I know that when schools are packed with early career educators, it takes a certain kind of dynamic, right? We want to keep not only helping our early career educators grow, but also having our very seasoned, experienced teachers stay in schools where they've been effective. And also helps make strong teams across grade levels and across buildings when we have stability. Everything else kind of stems from teacher retention when we do things like professional development, right? And then you have a dozen teachers that leave after the whole school has done professional development on a certain topic. It really limits the amount that stays within the school culture. So retention of teachers and that stability is so, so important. I would just really love for that to stay at the center of the conversation. I think that class sizes, while important, are not a magic fix-it. We've had small class sizes at my school and still struggled to find certified teachers to cover those class sizes. So class sizes are a part of the conversation, but they're not the end-all be-all. I really believe that teacher retention is an extremely, extremely important part of the conversation that I would love to remain at the center. And thank you for having this town hall.
Moriak.
Hello, I am Monica Moriak from the Christina School District, and I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. I am generally want to see Wilmington have the stability, the community of schools that they deserve and should have, and I will do whatever I can to work towards that, including supporting our schools as best as we can, whether they're with us or with somebody else. But I also want to make a comment around the fact that we talk about 2 or fewer districts in the city of Wilmington, which sounds good when you're thinking of 4 districts in the city, but really there are 23 educational governing bodies in the city of Wilmington. And I think that number gets lost. I think I personally would like to see one big Wilmington district. We should be able to fund that. I think that's best for the city of Wilmington. And then we figure out what is the funding that the schools need, but what is the funding that the communities need? Where is the stability of jobs and transportation and healthcare and all of those type of things? Housing is a huge issue that causes or leads to a lot of these issues. And I know that you're looking at a landscape analysis to look at these type of issues, so I'm excited to see what that result is. But 2 or fewer, I'm not sure that we're talking about getting rid of the other 20 educational governing bodies that are in there. So I feel like we do a disservice when we're ignoring that number. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing more hands. Last call for anyone online or in the room. I would think we have another slide that has that QR code on it.
Okay.
Right, so you can grab a picture of that to open it later. Hopefully folks at home can screen capture, or grab a picture of it too, to fill out and respond later. It's probably also linked from our website.
Yeah,
maybe.
and Haley has dropped it in the
Oh, and
chat.
Haley has dropped it in the chat. Awesome. So this was good. I know we went over time, but you all had wonderful things to say and we couldn't stop responding. So this is the time that we are at. I really, really appreciate you all for spending this evening with us and look forward to spending more evenings and mornings, afternoons, and Saturdays. The retreats are on Saturdays with you all as we continue the conversation.